Hi everyone, welcome back to the 86 F's to Give podcast. I'm your host Al, and I am so grateful that you are here joining me for episode number 12. I say this every episode, but I cannot believe we are 12 weeks in. It is crazy to me. I do want to apologize for this episode being a little delayed. I am going to be completely honest that I'm having a hard time finding motivation to do pretty much anything that's not go to work. That's not a cry for help. It's just I'm still in a funk apparently. And so I did want to make sure that I got an episode out because like I talk about in other episodes, doing this is so fun for me and brings me a lot of joy. And I knew I would feel better after doing it. So I wanted to make sure that I did so. Sorry if I'm a little low energy. I apologize that it's a little late. All the things, yada, yada, yada. I still wanted to get an episode out. So we're going to do probably a short and sweet one again this week, but that's okay. It's something that I'm excited to talk about. And yeah, let's kind of get into it. So today's topic, we're going to be talking about voting. We are pretty much exactly 1 month away from the 2024 presidential election. And that is probably a nerve-wracking statement for some people. I know it has me a little nervous. I think there's a lot of strong feelings around this election specifically. I work at a university, so there's been a lot of efforts to kind of educate and help a lot of the first-time voters because college-age students, are 18 to 22, whatever, so a lot of them are probably voting for the first time in this election. So we have a lot of efforts making sure that they kind of feel comfortable and safe doing so. One of the things they did this week was a panel about why Pennsylvania matters most in this election. And I usually stay very far away from talking about politics, but something told me to attend this panel, and I'm so glad that I did. I took so many notes, and I felt really empowered afterwards to obviously exercise my right to vote, to encourage people to vote, to educate not only myself, but other people around me to vote, and not just vote for the president, but vote up and down the ballot. And so I am feeling like I wanted to kind of share some of the things I learned in the notes that I took from the panel, and that's kind of what inspired today's episode, of course. I wanted to start with a few disclaimers because I know politics is such a sticky situation or topic to talk about. I first wanted to say that if you know me, you know that I am not the politics girly, okay? I don't ever talk about politics. It's just not my thing, and I don't really understand how much of it works. So again, that's kind of why I felt compelled to attend the panel. Honestly, I want to have a conversation about it in a very digestible and chill way that maybe helps other people feel inspired to kind of get involved and educate themselves more about voting and kind of who they're voting for and what they're voting for. My next disclaimer is that I may use the wrong terms or phrases or things. I'm going to do my best to just stick to the facts that I was given and that I researched, but if I misspeak, feel free to correct me in the comments. Just know I'm not doing it on purpose, okay? And then my last disclaimer is that I'm not going to talk about who I'm voting for, although it's probably pretty obvious, but I'm also not going to tell you who you need to vote for. And I'm not even really going to talk about the candidates because at the panel they didn't really talk about it, and that felt really refreshing. It was kind of why we need to do the work as voters to be prepared when we're voting. And that's kind of what I want to inspire people because we're coming down to the wire, okay? Those are all my disclaimers for today's episode. So the first thing that they kind of went over at the panel was how the Electoral College works. And I'm going to do a very, very brief explanation for people just to refresh our memories because I know this is something we learned in maybe middle school. I don't even know. But basically, each state gets a number of electoral votes based on how many electors they have. Basically, how it works is in all but 2 states, it's basically winner takes all. So if the majority of Pennsylvania votes for one candidate, that's who our 19 electors have to vote for, all 19 of them. In Maine and Nebraska, those are the only 2 states where it's not winner takes all, and I believe there's one county in each that usually kind of goes the opposite of the majority of the state. And I believe that decision of if it's all or not is up to each state. And like I said, it's only those 2 that don't do the majority rules kind of tactic there. And so why Pennsylvania matters a lot in most elections, but in this election specifically, is we have 19 electoral votes, and that is the most out of the 7 swing states. So the 7 swing states are Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, I think, or Wyoming, Wisconsin, and then Nevada and Arizona. We have 19, which is the most out of those 7 states. And swing states mean that they can kind of end up either Democratic or Republican in different elections. It just kind of depends on the candidates, and they don't always tend to lean one or the other. It just kind of is up in the air every election, whereas like other states such as California is like always blue and other states are always red, you know what I mean? That I thought was really interesting. And another thing that I learned was that Pennsylvania has voted for the winner of the presidential election in the last 10 out of 12 elections. So usually whoever wins Pennsylvania wins presidency, which is another key piece as to why we're so important, because again, we have so many electoral votes out of the swing states, and usually the president needs Pennsylvania. And then another piece, this was kind of in the like by the numbers section where they were giving a bunch of statistics. Another piece that I thought was really super interesting was, and it's probably like this in a lot of states, but obviously they were just talking about Pennsylvania, so that's the only information I have for you today, is that in Pennsylvania, the population is a little over 13 million. And once you subtract the people under 18 who are ineligible to vote, the people who are incarcerated who are ineligible to vote, the people that just don't register, you get down to about 7 million voters, which is a little over half, right? So that means that every voter that ends up voting is essentially voting for almost 2 people. Each of us that are able to vote are voting for our younger siblings. We're voting for people that are in jail. We're voting for undocumented citizens. You know, all these people that essentially don't have a voice in who becomes president, but are still greatly affected by who does become president. I thought that was really moving and empowering to not just think about ourselves, but to think about the people that are unable to vote and how different candidates will affect them as well, because we all have young people that we care about. A lot of us know people that are incarcerated, so we should be caring about how they're impacted by the election as well. And then another thing I wanted to point out was that, and I did know this, but I don't think I fully understood what it meant, that Pennsylvania is a closed primary state. And that means that in the primary elections, only Republicans can vote for Republicans and only Democrats can vote for Democrats. Essentially, if people are not registered as either of those parties, they can't vote. That subtracts a good portion of votes in the primary elections. And the primary elections are for who we want to represent us in the general elections, which can be for a whole slew of things such as presidents, senators, congressmen and women, governors, state reps, general attorneys, etc., a whole bunch of things, right? They were talking about how usually the people who are able to vote in both the primary and the generals kind of control the vote, right? Because they're able to even get who they want into the general elections, whereas maybe that vote would swing a little differently if everybody was able to vote. And something they shared was that is something that I believe is up to each state, and that we as Pennsylvanians can kind of speak out and lobby against that if we wanted that to be changed, which don't ask me exactly how we would do that, but I guess, emailing, calling the correct people to change that or to start that process. That's definitely something I want to do more research on, but I just thought it was neat that, I don't know, it feels like sometimes we don't have a lot of power as voters when we just, vote and the president still does whatever they want to do. Whereas, when there's things that are able to affect us on a more local level, we're able to go to our senators, go to our mayors, go to our Congress people, I don't know, you know what I mean, different levels of people, there's different people that are in charge of different issues, and kind of understanding that can help us get the things that we want fixed, right? Another piece that they talked about was that there are actually, of course, more than 2 parties, but that the Democratic and Republican Party are the only ones that really have the most resources and the most funding. And so people that are registered as independents or as libertarians or as part of the Green Party sometimes feel like they're kind of throwing away their vote if they don't vote Democratic or Republican, because historically no one outside of those 2 parties has ever won presidential elections. So they feel like they have to vote for somebody that doesn't necessarily align with their beliefs fully, whereas maybe somebody in the Green Party or the Libertarian Party does, but they feel like voting for them is a waste of a vote because we know that they're not going to win, which is really unfortunate. So then we kind of end up in this ongoing cycle of, people running in these parties but never winning because no one's actually voting for them because we're scared that they're going to lose, right? So I thought that was interesting, and I don't really know how to help that or to fix that issue, but that was something that I thought was something that I definitely want to do more research on and kind of look into, because I've never fully, and I don't think that's the point, it's for people to feel 100% aligned with our president or with any candidate, but there's definitely people that align more with people's views that just end up not winning because they're not getting the votes, right? Because they're not in the Democratic or Republican Party and they don't have the resources and the funding that the others do to campaign and do all the things. So I thought that was really neat. And then a few random notes that I wanted to touch on before I talk about the most important thing that they touched on at the panel was that if you're doing a mail-in ballot, ask for help. Have a parent or somebody, a teacher, whoever, sit with you and help fill it out, because it needs to be filled out correctly or it will not count. They will reject it, and some counties will alert you if you fill it out wrong, but a lot of counties don't have time or won't do that process, and it just ends up getting thrown out, and that's really sad. And then your vote ends up not counting, and that takes away your right. One thing that they pointed out was that it has to be signed, your signature, and that a lot of people tend to put their birthday after the signature. The date on there actually needs to be the date that you fill it out. So sometime in between when you receive the mail-in ballot in the mail and when you drop it back off is the date that needs to be written on your mail-in ballot, not your birthday, because that is years and years ago and not the day you filled it out, right? It's probably something that we all naturally just do because we do that at the doctor's office and all these things, but that is a point that they've emphasized that people tend to mistakenly do, and then it ends up, their ballot gets rejected, which is sad. So the key piece that they talked about that I really, really felt empowered by and took the most notes on was when they talked about young voters. And I would consider myself a young voter. This is my third election, but they didn't clarify what age groups they meant as young voters, but I would say probably anything under 30 or 30 and under, or even maybe 40 and under. I don't know. They were talking about how important and how there's more of us than there are of the older voters. And again, I don't know where the cutoff is, but you know what I mean. And that if we kind of, as younger voters, demanded more and all showed up and voted, politicians want to win, right? They're going to cater towards who is going to give them the most votes. So whether that's coming to college campuses and asking them kind of what they want to see, or, going to places, or even involving, social media more, which I know that, they've been doing in recent campaigns and stuff, catering to the younger population, the younger voters. We have so much power, and they will cater to us if we show them that that's how they win, right? I thought that was really interesting because it made me want to rally everyone I know to vote, right? And I think most of the people that I am friends with and are young voters that I know are voting, and I think that's amazing. I thought that was a really awesome point that they made, and I wish there was more students at this panel because it was mostly community members, and I just feel like me as a younger voter and just a younger person in general, I really felt like it was for me. Another thing they talked about with young voters is just the educational piece, and how a lot of we don't get taught really how voting works, or who is in charge of what issues. And so when we're in school and our school lunches get changed, or we don't have enough funding for art supplies or whatever it may be, or programs are getting cut, we associate that with whoever's in office at the time. And so then we're oh, well, I hate the Democratic Party because my school lunches got changed when there was a Democrat in office, or we didn't have, the art program got cut when there was a Democrat in office. And usually they have absolutely nothing to do with those things. It's a more local level, and it's your counties, your mayors, your, state representatives, people that are are your neighbors that you could actually go and speak to, probably, that are making those decisions. But no one knows that. So they're associating it with, whatever party's in office. And then that kind of makes them disinterested in that party or in voting in general, because they're okay, I'm being affected by this in a negative way. Why would I care? And I thought that was really interesting as well, as we need to start doing research, or maybe schools need to start teaching kids what level of the government is in charge of what thing. Who is making the decisions about our schools? Who's making decisions about the things that happen in our communities, or who's fixing our potholes, or who's, things like that, where it's the president is not affecting that at all, really. And so I think that is a really key piece as well. And I definitely want to do more research. And I feel there should almost be a graph in for each state or each county of okay, if you're having this issue, this is who you contact. If you're having this issue, this is who's in charge of that. Maybe that exists, but it's not something that they're presenting or giving out or teaching us in school. And I think that is something that is really beneficial and can kind of help people understand how politics and the government and civics works. Because like I said before, I have no idea. And yes, I can do my own research, but we should be learning these things in school. And maybe we did, and I just went right over my head. I don't know. But we should be learning them in a more digestible way so that we can remember them, okay? Another thing they talked about with young people specifically was that young voters care about issues, not necessarily like the people or the candidates or really like who's in office. We care about the environment. We care about reproductive rights. We care about immigration. We care about our LGBTQ plus friends and their rights and all that stuff. So that is really how we can get young people to kind of rally behind voting, is when you help them understand which candidate is going to be most aligned with how you feel about these specific issues. I thought that was a really awesome point too, is because like maybe like we don't understand policies about like fracking or like war, that's not really, I don't think, on the forefront of a lot of young voters' minds, but abortion is, and LGBTQ rights are, and the environment is. Like, those are things that we need to be educated on so we are making the right decision. And we can educate ourselves, right? But those are the things that we need to learn and understand how each candidate feels about those topics so that we can make sure we're giving our votes to the correct people. And those are things that we need to do up and down the ballot, not just the president, but again, the mayors, the senators, the Congress people. Those are things that we need to realize, like who affects what, and then do research onto how those people feel about these different issues that we're passionate about, and actually vote aligned with our own views, not our parents, not what TikTok says, not what the internet says, what we actually think and feel. And I felt really empowered to do that after hearing that. And like, I will definitely be doing a lot of research before, in the next few weeks before the election, because I want to make sure that my votes for every single piece of that ballot are going towards people that align with how I feel about things. And I'm not saying they're all going to win and it'll be fine, because a vote is a vote, and that's fair, and I appreciate the process. I want to make sure that if I'm doing my part in voting, I want it to go towards people that align with how I feel, and we should all be doing that. Moral of the story when talking about young voters is that we have so much more power than we think, and we need to start using it and showing politicians that they can't win without us. And I think they already know that, and more with social media and TikTok and all the things that are kind of blowing up and the way things can go viral these days. Like, politicians need to be using that to their advantage to get us to rally behind them as young voters, because we can really control more than we think. And I think that's going to be seen in this election. And in the panel, they were talking about how they think that the turnout is going to be one of the highest in any election in recent years, and and definitely maybe in any election. I think that's really exciting to see, is because this one in particular is people feel really passionate about it for a lot of reasons. And I think going both ways, there's a lot of people that feel really passionate about both candidates. So I think it'll be a really high turnout, and I'm excited and nervous to see how it all goes. I wanted to just share a few final thoughts, and I have one little reframing piece that will probably be the most controversial piece of this entire episode, but I'm going to save that for the end. First, I just kind of touched on this, but reminder to vote up and down the entire ballot. Flip your ballot over. Make sure you're hitting whoever's on the back. Even if it's just one person, you want to make sure you vote for all of them. Do your research beforehand. Realize who affects what issues, and make sure you're voting with people that align with your beliefs and the things that you care about. And no matter what party they're in, maybe for governor, you feel more aligned with a Republican, and then for president, you feel more aligned with a Democrat. Whatever it is, make sure you are filling out the entire ballot with people that are most aligned with you. No one's going to be 100%, but most aligned, right? The last thing I want to say that I feel like might be a little controversial, but I thought it was a really, really awesome point that one of the panelists brought up, and I had to share because it made me feel, it just put everything into perspective for me. This has been a question on my mind for a really long time, since I can remember, is just why people care about things that simply do not affect how they live their lives. It doesn't take anything away from them. It doesn't make their lives harder. It doesn't add any issues or, anything really to their lives. And I just simply cannot wrap my head around why people care so much, right? An example of this, and this is kind of the reframing I want to talk about, is that when we talk about controversial things and even just in conversations with like our friends and family and people in class or whatever, when we talk about controversial things such as reproductive rights or LGBTQ plus rights, we have to remember that if there is a stance that gets a loss of right by the other side kind of winning, and I'm doing air quotes here, getting, the policies that they want passed, that is a huge issue. And I'll give you an example. So if a pro-life person, believes that abortion should be illegal in all 50 states or whatever. They are not losing anything by abortion being legal in all 50 states, right? No one is forcing them to have an abortion. No one is dragging them to the doctors and getting an abortion done on them, right? Like, they're not losing anything. They still have the choice to have an abortion or not, right? But on the other side of that, if pro-choice believers, people that believe they should have the choice to have an abortion or not, if abortion is illegal, that choice gets stripped away from them. They don't have a right at all. There's no right to decide if they want to have an abortion or not. So they lose the choice, they lose the autonomy, they lose their rights. And that is when it becomes an issue. And so there's some reframing there, is that if you are on the side that is not losing anything either way, respectfully, F off. Like, I just don't understand why people care so much about things that do not affect them. I'll say it again. If you are pro-life, don't have an abortion. And I know this is the argument. I know this is the argument everywhere, but I will never wrap my head around it. And I hope I'm not like stirring the pot or anything. I'm sure it's pretty obvious how I feel about a lot of things as a bisexual, biracial female in America. Okay. I think it's pretty obvious, like who I'm voting for, how I feel. I think it's obvious. And so I'm sure it's not shocking to hear me say that's how I feel about these things, but and again, I've said that this has been a question for me all my life, but to hear a politician, a white male politician say this, I was like, wow, there's a little bit of hope, okay? There is a little bit of hope. I'm not saying all white males are anything. It's just refreshing to hear a white male politician speak about female rights, reproductive rights in these ways. And so, and it goes the same way for like LGBTQ plus rights. Like if gay marriage is illegal, gay people lose the right to marry the people that they want to marry. If it is legal, straight people are not losing anything, right? They still have the choice. No one is telling men to go marry, like no one is forcing a man to marry a man or a woman to marry a woman or anyone to marry anyone. Like, I'm not saying to only care about things that affect you, because like I care very deeply about the people that are affected by the hurricane right now. And we are fine up here in Pennsylvania. There hasn't even been a drop of water or really a gust of wind today or yesterday when the hurricane was happening in Florida and North Carolina. We're allowed to care about things that aren't directly affecting us. But when it causes someone else to lose rights, that's when I don't agree with us getting to have an opinion, right? Like, either way, you're actually getting what you want because you're not having an abortion or you're not marrying a woman, or a man. So like, I don't know. It just sometimes is really hard for me to wrap my head around. I hope that made sense and wasn't too like controversial or, I don't know, ignorant. But that's how I feel. And so I will leave us with that because, like I said, I didn't want this episode to be controversial at all. That's just kind of something that they said on the panel that I like immediately wrote down. I was like, yeah, exactly. Can't we all think like that? And so, yeah, I wanted to share my thoughts on that. Moral of the story, let's all take a day to Google what the ballot is going to look like in each of our states and Google the candidates and what they stand for and jot down some notes and be prepared for who you're going to vote for when you go to vote or when you fill out your mail-in ballot or whatever it may be. Make a plan, know where your voting poll is, know where you're dropping off your mail-in ballots, all the things. Now is the time to start preparing. It is 1 month away and I want everyone to feel like they did their part because it's our right to vote and we should exercise it. So that's where I'm going to leave you all today. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of 86 F's to Give. Reminder to follow us on TikTok and Instagram. Everything is linked. Subscribe to YouTube. All the things. Please leave a comment. I know this was a tricky one to maybe share your thoughts on, but I would love to hear what your plan is to vote. Let me know if you're doing a mail-in or if you're going to the polls or if you're taking a shuttle from campus. Let me know what your plan is to vote in the comments. That is a non-controversial way we can all kind of chit chat in the comments. But yeah, thank you for listening. Remember to 86 not voting if you're eligible to vote and registered. Yeah, if no one's told you recently, I love you. I'm proud of you. You're kicking life's butt. And I will see you all in the next one. Love you guys. Bye.